Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Washington Institute. I'm Rob Satloff, the director of the Institute, and I'm delighted to have you all join us for this very special event. We've all seen in the last couple of weeks enormous progress between Israel and Arab states in normalization, in making agreements between the United Arab Emirates and Israel, between Bahrain and Israel. We've seen other countries have discussions which themselves have the effect of normalizing the idea of having normal relations with Israel, public debates in countries around the Middle East. This is a huge transformation. But we've also seen over the years that while states can make peace, what really is the glue of peace is the development of people-to-people relations across national boundaries in the Middle East, that leaders are essential. Leaders like Sadat and King Hussein and Yitzhak Rabin and Menachem Begin. But leaders alone do not make true, full, lasting peace among the peoples of the region. That takes courageous individuals, people on the ground across the countries of the region, talking with each other, engaging with each other, willing to break down the barriers, sometimes that are stiff, sometimes that are high, sometimes that are broad, barriers between human contact. Today, we are very fortunate at the Washington Institute to host 4 outstanding, courageous public figures from the Arab world who have taken that leap and have been willing to face down opposition within their own institutions, countries, societies that have opposed and critiqued and sometimes threatened them for taking this leap toward peace. So today's program is stories from the front lines of Arabs taking leaps for peace in meeting with and talking to Israelis. To set the frame for today's discussion and to talk about an institution that helped make some of this possible, I'm delighted to introduce Joseph Braude. Joseph is the president of the Center for Peace Communications, and he's the author of a Washington Institute study 18 months ago, that laid out a policy approach that is being manifested in the courageous acts about which we're going to talk today. That study was called Reclamation, a cultural policy for Arab-Israeli relations. Before I turn the podium over to Joseph, who's also going to translate for our guests, who I will then introduce, I want to say, please send me your questions. Feel free to email me directly, Rob Satloff at rsatloff@washingtoninstitute.org, and I will filter your questions into our conversation as we proceed with today's program. So first I'm going to turn to Joseph, and then I'm going to turn to our 4 guests. Actually, let me briefly introduce our 4 guests right now. After Joseph's brief remarks, I'm going to turn to Mohamed Al-Hammadi. Mohamed is the editor-in-chief of the United Arab Emirates daily, Al-Roeya, and he's chair of the board of directors of the UAE Journalists Association. Very delighted that Mohamed is joining us today. Then I'm going to turn to Bahrain with Ahdeya Ahmed Al-Sayyid. Ahdeya is the president of the Bahraini Journalists Association. I'm very delighted that Ahdeya is joining us today. And then we're going to go to Dubai, where speaking with us will be Sukina Meshekhis. Sukina is a Saudi broadcaster and a very prominent voice on women's issues throughout the Gulf. She's joining us from Dubai. And then our 4th speaker will be Ismail Sayyid Ahmad, a Sudanese journalist speaking to us from Khartoum, a civic activist who has participated in national dialogue projects to foster reconciliation in his country, a country now going through enormous change and hopefully coming out the other end with a firm and lasting democracy. Delighted to have Ismail Sayyid Ahmad with us. So first, Joseph, and then we'll start with our panelists.
Thank you, Rob. It's great to be with you as always. And I want to tell you quickly the story of a remarkable event that happened late last year when 32 civic actors from 15 Arab countries came together publicly in the presence of Arab and international media. They repudiated the boycott of Israel and called for direct people-to-people relations between Israeli citizens and their own societies. That was the inaugural event of the Arab Council for Regional Integration, which is now a pan-Arab civil movement that is active on the ground and in the air across the region. Why did they do this? In their own words, the Arab Council opposes the mutual isolation and boycotting of the past 70 years for three reasons, all of which have to do with Arab interests at the heart. First, that the boycott prevented Arabs from benefiting from the potential benefits of partnership with Israeli citizens in a range of sectors. Second, the boycott blocked Arabs region-wide from building bridges between Israelis and Palestinians from a position of friendship. And third, and perhaps worst of all, the boycott became a kind of a template. That technology of incitement and scapegoating and blame deflection that initially targeted Israel and its people went on to become a tool that took new targets within Arab societies and contributed to the fracturing of these societies and destabilization of the region. Now, since the Abraham Accords were signed so recently, and then the Bahrain-Israel Agreement, the Arab Council's case has taken on a new electricity. Members of the group are on the ground brokering new partnerships between Israelis and those countries' populations. They're doing public events, they're doing humanitarian diplomacy in Yemen and capacity building for civil peacemakers in Sudan. The work is not easy. And I think that the group that you've assembled today here, Rob, is going to give you a real good sense of what it takes to advance a peace between peoples. And with that, I turn it back to you.
All right, well, thank you very much, Joseph. So first, we're going to turn to Mohamed. Mohamed, the floor is yours.
Yeah. شكرا جزيلا روبرت وكذلك شكرا جوزيف مقدما على ترجمتك لهذه الندوة.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Joseph, in advance for the translation you're about to do.
هذه الندوة مهمة حيث نحن نتكلم اليوم عن تداعيات السلام في منطقتنا، وكنت أتمنى حقيقة وأتمنى في المستقبل أن يكون بعض الزملاء الإعلاميين الصحفيين المؤمنين بالسلام معنا في مثل هذه الندوة.
This is going to be an important event because we're talking about the implications of peace in the region, and I hope that going forward we're going to have the participation of additional journalists from the region who also believe in peace.
طبعا وقتنا قصير جدا وانا احاول اكون مقتضب يعني محدد في كلامي. بداية نقول نحن كاعلاميين عرب مع السلام ونؤيد السلام وهذه قناعتنا، وفي نفس الوقت نحن مع الحقوق الفلسطينية التي نؤمن بأنها يجب أن ترجع للشعب الفلسطيني.
There isn't a lot of time, so I'm going to be brief and to the point. First of all, we, the journalists you see here, are for peace and we believe in advancing peace. At the same time, we also believe in advancing the rights of the Palestinians.
كما تعرف روبرت وجوزيف وجميع المتابعين أننا اليوم في منطقتنا الجميع يؤمن بالسلام، الجميع يحب السلام، الجميع يرغب بالسلام.
Of course, you, Rob and Joseph, you both know that in our region, everyone wants peace and yearns for peace.
ولكن هناك يبدو عندنا نوعين من السلام، السلام بشكل عام والسلام مع إسرائيل. السلام بشكل عام الكل يريده، السلام مع إسرائيل له معنى آخر وله تعامل آخر.
But whereas everybody wants peace in general or in principle, the issue of peace with Israel has another meaning and special issues.
الحديث عن السلام مع إسرائيل يعني كما نحن معكم اليوم أن من يتكلم عن إسرائيل وعن السلام مع إسرائيل فهو في خانة المتهمين، يا إما أنه مطبع والتطبيع كلمة سيئة في منطقتنا، يا إما أنه يطلق عليه أنه متصهين أو أنه خائن وضد القضية الفلسطينية.
The problem that we see is that people who speak in support of peace with Israel are accused of being traitors, normalizers. It is a stigma, and they find themselves falling under attack.
وربما نذكر من المهم أن نذكر التاريخ. ربما لو نسترجع عقود من الزمان عندما نتذكر الكثير من العرب مفكرين صحفيين كتاب كانوا يؤمنون بالسلام، ماذا كان مصيرهم؟ بعضهم دفع حياته ثمنا لإيمانه بالسلام.
Let's go back and think about the history of the region. Many Arab thinkers and cultural figures and important voices who believed in peace found themselves, some were killed, others were punished in all sorts of ways.
وهذا ما حدث معي ومع زميلتي أهدية الأسبوع الماضي بعد أن شاركنا في ندوة حول الإعلام والسلام مع إسرائيل، وكان الهجوم علينا شديدا وحتى هذه اللحظة. وبالأمس تم نشر صورنا مع ختم مطبع، يعني أهدية مطبعة وأنا مطبع، وتعرفون ماذا يعني مطبع في عالمنا وحجم التحريض في مثل هذه الرسائل.
And that is the sort of thing that happened to two of us, starting just last week when Ahdeya and I jointly participated in a public gathering with Israelis. And as a result, we found ourselves, and to this very moment, being attacked and targeted and stamped and branded as normalizers. And as you all know, that word normalizer has a very, very negative connotation in our region.
نحن نؤمن بالسلام، ووجودنا معكم هنا وحديثنا عن السلام ينبع من إيماننا العميق حقيقة بأننا في منطقتنا هذه بحاجة إلى السلام. شعوب المنطقة تستحق السلام.
And we believe in peace, and our presence with you today reflects the fact that we believe that the region needs it and deserves it.
ولكن يجب أن نتعلم من دروس الماضي. قبل 41 عاما كان هناك سلام في المنطقة، كان السلام ربما هو سلام بين الحكومات، ربما هو سلام بين الورق. اليوم يجب أن يكون السلام مختلف، السلام بشكل آخر.
We need to learn the lessons of the past. Going back 41 years, there's been a kind of peace that was a peace between governments. Today, but only between governments. Today, peace needs to be different. It needs to take on a new sort of form.
بلا شك السلام يحتاج أن يكون بين الشعوب أكثر. الشعوب هي التي تصنع السلام. المعاهدات والأوراق والاتفاقيات تساعد على ذلك، لكن هل نستطيع أن نوصل رسالة السلام إلى شعوب المنطقة؟ أنا أعتقد هذا هو التحدي الكبير.
There is no question that while peace agreements and state-to-state understandings are important, it is the peoples who make peace. And are we going to be able to bring it to that form? Well, let's talk about it.
شخصياً أعتبر نفسي محظوظ لأني أنا من دولة الإمارات، ولدي قيادة شجاعة وقيادة حكيمة تستطيع أن تتخذ القرارات الكبيرة بكل شجاعة.
First of all, I consider personally myself to be fortunate that I'm a citizen of the United Arab Emirates, where the leadership has been able to make these such bold decisions and to do so with great courage.
الإمارات واضحة كانت منذ اللحظة الأولى، هي تريد السلام وهو في نفس الوقت مع حق الشعب الفلسطيني، وهذا الأمر ربما ما لا يريد أن يسمعه أعداء السلام. أعداء السلام يريدون الجميع بعيداً عن السلام.
So the UAE, again, it has made it clear that it wants peace. It wants peace, and it also wants the rights of the Palestinians. And that duality is something that the enemies of peace don't want to hear. They don't want to allow for that duality to exist.
الإمارات اتخذت ربما خطوة شجاعة عندما ألغت قانون 1972 الذي يعتبر إسرائيل عدو، وبالتالي انتقلت الإمارات إلى مرحلة أخرى في علاقتها مع إسرائيل وفي تعاملها مع الصراع العربي الإسرائيلي.
The UAE made the crucial decision to repeal its 1972 law, which formally regarded Israel as an enemy. And that has brought us to the moment that we see now.
لذلك نجد اليوم من يتابع يجد كيف الهجوم في الإعلام المعادي للسلام في وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي على دولة الإمارات، على قيادات دولة الإمارات، كلها محاولات تنمر، محاولة ترهيب للتراجع عن هذا القرار الكبير.
And that is why you are now seeing everywhere in media across the region and saturating social media attacks on the UAE, accusations against the UAE, and all of this is a result of that historic decision.
يجب كذلك أن نفهم هل هناك ونتساءل هل هناك سلام جيد وهناك سلام سيء في منطقتنا؟
And let's ask ourselves, is there such a thing as a good peace and a bad peace in our region?
أتساءل لسبب بسيط. كلكم تعرفون أن تركيا تعقد اتفاق سلام ولديها علاقة مع إسرائيل منذ 70 عام. وبالأمس لبنان وقعت ترسيم الحدود مع إسرائيل. لن تجدوا هجوما على تركيا ولا على لبنان، حتى حزب الله لم يتكلم. إذن لماذا الهجوم على الإمارات؟ لماذا الهجوم على البحرين؟ يجب
And
أن
so by way of example, I mean, let us consider that for quite some time, Turkey has had diplomatic relations with Israel. And only yesterday, we've seen strides toward an agreement between Lebanon and Israel in demarcation of borders. And yet, you don't hear attacks on Turkey for this reason, and even Hezbollah has been silent about the new Lebanese understandings. بس أذكر عزيزي بأنه ما يبقاش إلا قرابة دقيقة ونص. تفضل.
خلص. طيب هنا يجب أن نؤكد على نقطة. كثير حقيقة من الإعلاميين المفكرين الكتاب يريدون أن يسيروا في طريق السلام، لكنهم يخشون من هذه الخطوة الكبيرة في منطقتنا.
And so let me say that there are many people like us in the world of journalism and other sectors who share our views and want to move forward to peace, but they are afraid.
يخشون لأن هناك قوانين صارمة ضد التطبيع، ضد العلاقة مع إسرائيل، ففي بعض الدول ربما يسجن البعض لسنوات، وربما هناك يعني عقوبات أقصى حول هذا الموضوع.
Part of the reason why they're afraid is that in many of their countries, there are still laws that criminalize normalization. The punishments include imprisonment and even death. And that is indeed an intimidating factor.
لذلك أنا أعتقد في آخر كلامي أن يجب أن نفكر قليلا في مسألة التشريعات التي موجودة في منطقتنا. نحن نؤكد ونرد على الدعاية السيئة ضد السلام. نحن مع الحق الفلسطيني، نحن مع الشعب الفلسطيني، لكن نحن مع السلام. يجب أن نغير واقع منطقتنا حتى تعيش الشعوب في أمن وسلام واستقرار.
Mm-hmm. And so that is why I would like to say, I think that we need to rethink the issue of these anti-normalization laws as part of the road to peace. And we want peace and the rights of the Palestinians to be achieved. And this all needs to be looked at it in a holistic way. Shukran, Zizi.
Thank you very much, Mohamed Al-Hammadi, the chair of the board of directors of the Emirati Journalists Association. And now we're going to go to the chair of the president of the Bahraini Journalists Association, Ahdeya Ahmed Al-Sayyid. Ahdeya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Robert. First of all, thank you very much for hosting us today. And I hope that we can convey the messages we are here to convey. I'm president of the Bahrain Journalists Association, and I represent 600 journalists in Bahrain, TV, radio, and print media journalists. I've always believed in peace, and I've had personal relations with many Israelis, and I knew that one day something will happen, because I've always believed that my leadership is interested in having peace with Israel. So this is me. Last Monday, under the auspices of the Arab Council for Regional Integration, I joined media from my country, Bahrain, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Algeria, and Sudan for a special town hall in which we connected with our Israeli media counterparts and discussed how we can work together through the content we create to support peace between people. It was very heartening and deeply moving to be greeted as well by a message of encouragement from the President of Israel himself. And that was just like an offer of an open door policy from two Israel, and there was an offer of an open door policy from two Israeli cabinet ministers. It was an amazing event. We got an opportunity to speak to our counterparts in Israel and to have an agreement how we journalists can make a difference. Then after this meeting, of course, we were seriously attacked by so-called journalist syndicates. And I'll share with you briefly some of the things that appeared on the media. The Palestinian Journalists Syndicate issued statements asking for apologies for the statements we have made. And then there was another statement by an entity called the Palestinian Media Forum, and they had our pictures published. And I'll try not to show the pictures of my Bahraini colleagues because we don't want to put them in danger. But they published that, and what was most upsetting is that an syndicate in charge or advocates for freedom of expression does that to their own colleagues who express their opinion about something. And then, of course, this is a picture that I'll try to cover, and it says this is a blacklist, and the word blacklist is a threat by itself. Of course, when the media forum, an entity called the Media Forum, published our pictures, this is, of course, a picture of Mohamed. They refer to us as enemies of humanity, and I feel threatened by that, because by calling me an enemy of humanity, it's like putting a target on our heads because we express freely what we think about the peace agreement. And then there was another statement from another entity, and it was Hamas media entity. Again, Hamas is a terrorist organization. So when you have your names published by a media entity that is under the Hamas leadership, it is a direct threat. We have been called many names, but we continued because we believe that we have a mission. I got a text message from the Palestinian Journalist Syndicate threatening me and telling me, how would you feel if you lose your own children? I took that as a threat because that's a statement that you don't have to necessarily make. You have already condemned, you have called us enemies of humanity, but to involve children and families of the people who are promoting peace is unacceptable. Actually, I think it's a crime. What I'd like to say that these statements made by these syndicates, they have called on all Arab countries from which the Arab Council drew participants to apply their laws, criminalizing normalization and evict the journalists from their work and social environments. In addition, a statement also by their members demanding that I apologize for my behavior, of course, and it was, I consider, a message of intimidation to all Bahraini journalists, and for that matter, all Arab journalists who would like to follow in our footsteps. Unfortunately, one of our colleagues who participated, a non-Bahraini colleague who participated in the event, was also fired from his job. Then, of course, these pictures, and which is a direct threat, while Palestinian Journalist Syndicate was a major drive of this campaign, which I truly believe there is a coordination between the syndicate and these other entities. They were not alone. We saw equivalent efforts targeting the Algerian participant, hostilities against the Sudanese participant, and threats and incitement on social media from numerous Arab countries where normalization remains an official crime. It is important to stress that many people are acting on this basis because this stems from the legacy of the Nasserist and Islamist ideologies, which remain strong in some states today. And we know that members of the Muslim Brotherhood, who have mainly been aggressive towards us. They are labeled as a terrorist organization. Hamas is a terrorist organization. So it would be helpful.
Yeah, just a friendly reminder that you have about a minute left so we can keep things moving. Thank you. I apologize for being a stickler. No
I'll
problem.
just end it with something that I hope that will materialize to bring peace between people. The campaign of coercion against Arab journalists who believe in peace must be brought to an end. I've shared my story today with you, and I believe in the legislation which Senators Cory Booker and Rob Portman introduced in August, which calls for the Secretary of State to issue an annual report on instances of Arab government or non-government retribution for civil peacemakers. The more we stand together in solidarity, the more we spotlight this behavior, the sooner we will bring an end to it.
Ahdeya, thank you so much for telling us your story of courage in the face of intimidation. Thank you. We're now going to turn to Dubai, where Sukina Meshekhis is, to tell us her story. Sukina?
نعم، أنا سكينة المشيخس، مقدمة برنامج حديث الخليج على قناة الحرة الأمريكية، وعضو مؤسس في المجلس التكاملي الإقليمي مع الأستاذ جوزيف، وأيضاً كاتبة رأي وناشطة في مواقع التواصل الاجتماعي.
My name is Sukina Meshekhis. I'm the host of Hadith Al-Khalij, which is a program on Al-Roeya. I'm an opinion writer in the Gulf, and I'm also a founding member of the Arab Council for Regional Integration.
نعم، في الحقيقة هنالك العديد من المخاوف والمضايقات التي يتعرض لها دعاة السلام في الخليج والوطن العربي بشكل عام.
There are indeed many forms of persecution awaiting those who support peace with Israel in the region, in the Arab region, and the Gulf region in general.
وبعضها يصل كما ذكر الأستاذ محمد الحمادي حد السجن والتهديد وأيضاً التخوين.
These include, as Mohamed Al-Hammadi has already said, they go as far as imprisonment and accusations of treachery.
عدا الحروب النفسية التي نتعرض لها في مواقع التواصل الاجتماعي وأحياناً في بيئة العمل.
Not to mention, of course, the psychological warfare against such persons, ranging from campaigns in social media to the workplace.
أنا سأتحدث اليوم عن تجربتي الشخصية مع الدعوة للسلام مع إسرائيل.
I'll speak for today about my own personal experience in calling for peace with Israel.
وما تعرضت له في السابق وحالياً.
And I've been exposed to as a result, both in the past and up to the present.
على سبيل المثال في سنة 2018 كتبت مقال في صحيفة اليوم السعودية، وهي صحيفة رسمية سعودية.
By way of example, in 2018, I published a column in الحدث قلتي عفواً اسم
صحيفة اليوم.
اليوم, which is a Saudi daily newspaper. I wrote a column.
هذا المقال كان يتحدث عن السلام مع إسرائيل وبأن السلام مع إسرائيل أصبح ضرورة بسبب المرحلة والمتغيرات السياسية.
The column opined that peace with Israel is a matter that has become necessary in light of the way the region has evolved.
وبأن إسرائيل هي دولة شرق أوسطية وحالياً يعني جربنا الحرب سابقاً فلماذا لا نجرب السلام؟
It argued that Israel is a state in the Middle East. We've tried war. Why not try peace?
كنت سعيدة وقتها بنجاح المقال والاحتفاء الذي يعني جوبه به من قبل مثلاً بعض المواقع العربية، المواقع السعودية، وأيضاً من مثلاً إسرائيل بالعربي وغيره.
I was pleased with the successful outcome of warm responses that it received, both in Arabic media and social media, and for that matter, within Israel, on Israel's own Arabic platforms.
بعدها جاءني أحد المسؤولين في القناة وهو يعني ونحن نعمل جميعا في قناة أمريكية، وخاطبني بأني لو استمريت في كتابة مثل هذه المقالات سأفقد وظيفتي.
But after that, I was surprised to be threatened by a person in the workplace who said that if I continue writing that sort of thing, I'll lose my job.
على المستوى الحكومي السعودي حتى الآن مثلا لم أتعرض إلى أي استدعاء أو تحقيق أو ردة فعل سواء سلبية أو إيجابية من قبل السلطات.
And the level of Saudi government, I personally have not been I've not been summoned or faced any personal punishment by the Saudi government to this point.
ولم يتعرض أي شخص سعودي أو من نادوا بالسلام وهم مقيمين في السعودية لأي استدعاء يعني بتهمة دقيقة الدعوة للسلام مع إسرائيل. حتى الآن لم يوقف أحدهم بهذه التهمة بشكل دقيق.
And others indeed, nor have others been summoned or punished by the government for the accusation of having committed normalization per se.
ولكن للأسف تم إيقاف 2 من دعاة السلام وهو عبد الحميد الغبين ودحام العنزي سابقا.
However, unfortunately, 2 well-known civil peacemakers, Abd al-Hamid al-Ghabain, you said, والثاني
دحام العنزي.
Okay, those 2 were indeed subjected to a form of government retribution.
لم توجه لهم تهمة مثلا دعم السلام بشكل مباشر، ولكن نحن في السعودية لدينا مخاوف تختلف بأن
They were not accused directly of normalization or making the case for peace. That was not the accusation that was leveled against them.
نحن لدينا مخاوف لأن هنالك فجوة كبيرة ما بين القيادة التي تدعو للإصلاح متمثلة بسمو الأمير محمد بن سلمان، وبأن هنالك ما زالوا مؤدلجين يعملون في أجهزة الدولة قد يشكلون خطر علينا نحن.
We are in a state of fear because of the apparent gap that now exists between the highest levels of authority, which are for example, represented by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, that is moving forward toward a peace-oriented agenda on the one hand, and people who work within the state, some elements within the state, that remain under the influence of these ideologies on the other hand.
لذلك نتمنى نحن دعاة السلام أن نشعر بالطمأنينة تجاه مثلا أوضاعنا وبأننا محميين من أي اضطهاد مستقبلي سواء على مستوى الحكومات أو حتى في بيئة العمل.
So civil peacemakers obviously hope to feel more safe and secure in their own workplaces and in their own environments in the country, so that they can continue doing what they do.
لأننا مؤمنين بأن السلام الحقيقي ليس فقط على مستوى الحكومات ولكن لابد أن يكون أيضا على المستوى الشعبي.
And that is because, again, we believe that real peace can't just be among or between governments. It has to be on the civil level as well.
وبأن انطلاقنا للحديث عن إيجابية السلام سيشجع الآخرون للخطى في ذات الخطى التي نسير فيها الآن.
And we also believe that launching a discourse in support of peace can encourage and embolden others to follow in this path.
أعلم جيداً بأن هناك أكثرية صامتة تريد السلام ولكنها تخشى الحديث والتصريح خشية أن تتعرض للإيذاء والعزلة المجتمعية.
I know very well that there is a kind of a silent majority that wants and believes in the peace agenda, but is afraid to raise its voice because it's afraid of social ostracism and isolation and other forms of retribution.
بل يصل بعضها أن تفصل من وظائفها أو لا تجد قبول في جهات العمل.
They're afraid that they'll lose their jobs or not be accepted within their workplaces.
أضم صوتي إلى الزميل محمد الحمادي. نتمنى أن تكون هنالك المزيد من التشريعات التي تحمي دعاة السلام. أيضاً أنا أتمنى أن يكون هنالك تضامن دولي. يعني نحن نتحدث عن السلام لا ندعو إلا للسلام، لذلك نريد أن يكون تضامن دولي وتشريعات أكثر لحمايتنا في المستقبل.
I would add my voice to that of Mohamed Al-Hammadi, who has called for new laws that can afford protection to civil peacemakers. And I would also urge and ask for international solidarity for people to stand with civil peacemakers who face these kinds of consequences.
بقي وقت ولا انتهى؟
تقريبا انتهينا، بس طبعا ان شاء الله نتناقش حول ما بعد. شكرا على ضبطك الوقت عزيزي. شكرا. Go ahead.
Sukina, thank you very much. Thank you for telling us your story. Absolutely fascinating and important. Again, let me remind everyone before I turn to our friend from Khartoum, if you have questions for our conversation, please email me directly, rsatloff@washingtoninstitute.org. Now we'll go to Ismail Sayyid Ahmad from Khartoum, Sudan. Ismail, the floor is yours.
لا مساء الخير. إسماعيل سيد أحمد. أنا صحفي سوداني عملت في عدد من الصحف العربية والخليجية لأكثر من 34 عاما، وفي نفس الوقت ناشط مدني في مجال المصالحة والحوار الوطني.
Greetings to everyone. My name is Ismail Sayyid Ahmad. I'm Sudanese from Khartoum. I've been working in the realm of media for 34 years, writing for Sudanese and Gulf and other Arabic publications. And I've also worked as a civic actor in support of national reconciliation within Sudan.
سعيد أنا بالمشاركة في موضوع الآن يعد من مواضيع الساحة في المنطقة، ألا وهو التقارب العربي الإسرائيلي. وفي اعتقادنا أن السلام هو المخرج الأساسي لاستقرار المنطقة، ومن خلال حفظ الحقوق للشعبين الإسرائيلي والفلسطيني.
I'm very pleased to join this and other initiatives in support of Arab-Israeli connectivity and engagement, because I believe that is what my country and our region needs. It's the way to achieve stability in the region, and it's the way to achieve the rights of the Palestinians as well.
نعتقد إنه يعني العالم المنطقة جربت خلال السنوات الماضية 72 سنة كل الأعمال العنف والأعمال العسكرية، لكن وضح جليا أنه لا مجال إلا لحل هذه القضية إلا عن طريق الحوار وإفشاء هذه الثقافة أكثر مما مضى.
For 72 years, our region has tried all forms of violence and conflict with Israel, and we have come to the realization that there's really no way to resolve this conflict other than through direct engagement, through dialogue, and through working together.
ما يفرض هذا الواقع إنه الآن السلام ينبع من القاعدة، من الشعوب هي الآن طواقة للسلام.
What's remarkable about this moment is that we're seeing a trend in which this desire for peace stems from the population itself.
أنا من المؤسسين والمبادرين لتأسيس المجلس العربي للتكامل الإقليمي، وهي مبادرة يعني تحث لثقافة السلام والاندماج والشراكة بين الشعوب بين كل مكوناتها وطوائفها وجنسياتها وألوانها المختلفة.
I am a founding member of the Arab Council for Regional Integration, and it is an organization that strives to sort of overcome the borders and boundaries among all different races and ethnicities and nationalities and groups within the region.
قناعتي بأن المنطقة الآن بأكثر حاجة لتفعيل إرادة الشعوب التي هي طواقة للسلام.
And we believe, and I believe, that the region at the moment is in the greatest need to actualize the desires of its peoples to have peace.
والآن عندما أتحدث عن هذا الهم أنا يعني أتحدث من منطلق هي رغبة شبابية جامحة.
And when I say this, I'm really expressing a very widespread yearning, particularly among the youth.
الآن غالبية الشباب يعني وأنا أتحدث هنا عن السودان، الآن جيل الشباب في السودان هو ليس الجيل الماضي، الآن هو جيل طواق للسلام يريد كسر حاجز المقاطعة والانخراط في الشراكة المجتمعية.
Today, youth, and now I'm talking about Sudan in particular, the majority of young people in my country are not like generations past. They strive to break the barrier of the boycott, for the sake of development in their own country.
السودان الآن الذي هو غدا سيوقع اتفاق سلام مع بين المجتمع السوداني من بين الحكومة والحاملية السلاح، هو في نفس الوقت طواق للسلام العالمي، الانخراط في المجتمع الدولي من أجل تحقيق مصالحه الدولية.
This present government in Sudan, which we expect tomorrow, is going to forge an internal peace agreement between the government and those who bear arms outside the realm of government within the country. Similarly, is striving to rejoin the international community.
السلام والتقارب والتطبيع يعني الآن أصبح في السودان هو حديث الساعة، يعني لا يخلو منتدى أو تجمع رسمي أو شعبي أو وإلا يتم الحديث عن هذا الموضوع بشكل علنيا، وتجد الأصوات الطواقة لهذه الشراكة هي الأعلى.
Yeah, the issue of peace and coming together and normalization is an issue that in Sudan is so hotly discussed today. Hardly does any civil gathering or club or group meeting take place, then the issue isn't raised publicly and clearly and boldly.
ظهرت والدليل على ذلك انه المطلع على مواقع التواصل الاجتماعي يجد كثير من الفيديوهات لشباب يدعون الى التقارب والتطبيع، وليس أدل على ذلك ظهور جمعية للصداقة السودانية الإسرائيلية التي تأسست حديثا والتي يعني أطلقت بمساعدة المجلس العربي للتكامل الاجتماعي.
And evidence of this is manifest if you look at social media, where you will find many videos and appearances of Sudanese people talking openly about their desire for peace with Israel. And one example is the recent founding of the Sudanese Israeli Friendship Association with assistance from the Arab Council for Regional Integration.
هذه الأجواء المتفائلة هي التي الآن تسيطر على الوضع داخل السودان بشكل واضح وبارز، وافتكر انه يعني هذا يرجع لانه الجيل الان او الذي يقود هذا العمل هو جيل الشباب الذي لا ينتمي الى احزاب، ينتمي الى السلام، هو رافع شعار السلام والعداله، السلام الداخلي والسلام العالمي.
This sentiment is the prevailing sentiment in the country today, particularly among the youth. And these are youth who don't identify with a particular party or a particular faction. They're the youth who identify with that slogan, which erupted. He's referring, of course, to the December demonstrations, the call for peace and freedom and justice.
كل ذلك ينبع من إنه السودان الآن يعيش حالة خاصة، حالة استثنائية، حالة من الحريات التي هي فجرت هذه الطاقات الشبابية والتي جعلت الشباب يتحدثون وينادون بما هو يعني يهم مصلحتهم.
And this is the result of a lifting of suppression and the experience of greater freedom, and Sudanese now having the opportunity to express their aspirations and talk about what they feel they need in order to move forward. لو الآن اقتربنا من ربما يبقى لك دقائق عزيزي، دقيقة خلينا نقول.
بالتأكيد إنه مثل هذه الأعمال تجد من يعارضها أو يناهضها، وهي لكن في السودان هي مجموعات معروفة، يعني مجموعات متشددة، مجموعات الإسلام السياسي، مجموعات القوميين العرب، لكن لا تأثير لهم في الشارع يعني السوداني بشكل واضح.
Of course, this does encounter opposition, and in Sudan that opposition is from familiar and long-standing groups that embrace Nasserism or various Islamist ideologies. But we find that their presence on the streets is not as strong as it was in the past.
السلام عمل مهم وحالة يعني يريدها الجميع، لكن في نفس الوقت تحتاج إلى مناصرة من جمهور النخبة في واشنطن الذي أتاح لنا هذه الفرصة للتضامن معنا، ويمكننا من خلال هذا التضامن هذه المناصرة القيام بكثير من الأدوار لتعزيز السلام بين الشعوب في هذه المنطقة.
This peace, which is so nascent and so needed and so desired, needs support. It needs solidarity. And this very opportunity to address an elite community in Washington is an example of, or a manifestation of hope to garner that type of solidarity.
Very, very good. Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
شكرا عزيزي. نكمل بعدين من خلال المناقشة. شكرا.
Thank you very much, Ismail, and thank all of you. We now have about a half an hour for us to have a conversation about all this. And I'd like to begin by asking Mohamed and Ahdeya. You are both not just outstanding journalists, but you both lead your national journalist associations. Can you tell us, has there been a debate? That's a polite way of phrasing it. Has there been opposition, a debate within your institutions about the idea that their leader hasn't been engaging in this sort of relationship with Israeli journalists?
Ahmed first.
Mohamed.
Ladies first. Ahdeya, please, you can start.
Thank you. Actually, there have been some journalists that have opposed to it. And I think that's very normal in a country where you respect freedom of press and freedom of expression. There will be people who will not agree with you, but the majority, and by the majority I mean probably 95%, are totally with the peace agreement. And I can see that through their reactions to everything being published, to the op-ed pages, the Economist, their television programs. So I think when you see the press supporting the peace agreement through these columns, through sharing their opinions and supporting it, it says that the majority of colleagues are with it. I don't think that in Bahrain, the majority of journalists are silent. Actually, they are being very active, very courageous, very brave, and I'm very proud. The core of my job is to protect, as board member of the Bahrain Journalists Association, to protect them, but I don't see the necessity of protecting them from anything in Bahrain. I'm just concerned about their safety and security when they travel to places where there are terrorist entities that have been threatening us.
Thank you. Mohamed?
بشكل عام يعني هناك دعم كبير من الإعلاميين هنا وحتى من القيادة لهذه الخطوة، لأن الجميع يعتبر هذا قرار سيادي لدولة الإمارات وهذه خطوة استراتيجية.
In general, here in the UAE, there is widespread support in the media for the step because this is a sovereign decision by the leadership of the UAE, by the leadership of the UAE government.
لكن ليس هناك، خلينا نقول، ليس هناك تحرك أو هناك موقف معلن من الجميع. أنا أعتقد الجميع يصمت في هذه اللحظات. نحن نقوم بدورنا كمتحمسين لهذه القضية، لكن هناك دعم، خلينا نقول، معنوي موجود يعني، ونحن مرتاحين من هذا الأمر. حتى القيادة هنا، حتى المسؤولين لديهم هذا يعني يشعرون بهذا الدعم في هذا المجال.
There are certainly those who are silent and who are not speaking about the issue so much right now, but it falls on those of us who are the most excited and enthusiastic about this agreement to express ourselves and express our support for the leadership. And praise God, we enjoy support for doing that.
Okay. And let me ask Sukina and Ismail, your countries are sort of debating this issue. Your peoples are debating this issue. Can you tell us a little bit about how that debate, Sukina, among your professional colleagues and even not just other journalists, but can you tell us a little bit about this debate of among Saudi society about whether or not now is the moment? Is it too soon? Is it too late? Is it the right moment to move forward in this way? And Ismail, the same with you in just a moment.
جوزيف ممكن تترجم لي؟
يعني السؤال على ما يبدو هناك جدل في كلا من السعودية وأيضا السودان بخصوص قضية التطبيع. هل هو الطريق الصحيح؟ هل هو سابق لأوانه أو العكس؟ يعني ما الذي تنظرين بخصوص الجدل في السعودية بخصوص قضية التطبيع؟
أنا أعتقد بأن هذا هو الوقت المناسب. حتى الآن لا توجد خطوة رسمية سعودية باتجاه السلام، لكن كما قلت سابقاً هنالك نوعين من السلام: سلام بارد وسلام دافئ. السلام البارد الذي يكون على مستوى الحكومات، وهذا يعني غير مرغوب به في هذه المرحلة.
So certainly I see that although the Saudi Arabia as a leadership has not yet taken official step toward peace, my own view of it is there's two kinds of peace, a cold one and a warm one. The cold one has not been effective or successful.
نعم، نتحدث اليوم عن السلام الدافئ بين الشعوب. أجد أن هنالك شريحة سعودية يعني تعتبر كبيرة مقارنة بما قبل تدعو للسلام مع إسرائيل. أيضاً هنالك دعم من النخب الفكرية والإعلامية، ولا توجد نخب سياسية تتحدث، ولكن هنالك نخب فكرية، هنالك نخب ثقافية.
And so, indeed, we are talking about a warm peace, and we are seeing considerable popular expressions of popular support for that peace. And significantly, we're seeing it among elites. I'm not going to say political elites, because political elites don't necessarily express themselves in a formal sense, but we're seeing it among cultural elites, intellectual elites, who are conveying their support for a warm peace.
وهذه النخب قادرة على تحريك الشارع. لذلك لو قامت السعودية في المستقبل، ونتمنى ذلك، بالتوقيع على أي اتفاقيات سلام مع إسرائيل، لن تجد معارضة شعبية، لأن هنالك تقبل من الشارع.
So, and these elites are capable of moving the street. They're capable of influencing public opinion in a constructive way. And I believe that if the leadership chose to move toward peace, they would not encounter a massive popular opposition to it.
Okay, thank you. And Ismail, just in terms of Sudan, there's a bit of a debate in Washington. Is it too fast to press Sudan to do this? We don't want the democratic experiment to break over this issue, or is it the right time to do this because the Sudanese are ready for it? How is the debate on this inside Khartoum?
بس تحب أوضح السؤال أستاذ؟
إيه.
أوكي. يقول إنه في هنا الآن في واشنطن هناك نوع من جدل أو جدلية ما بين الذين يقولون إنه السلام السوداني الإسرائيلي ربما سابق لأوانه، لأنه لم تصل هذه الرغبة الشعبية للسلام إلى النضوج لغاية الآن، بينما هناك من يؤيد السلام وعلى الفور. فما رأيك؟ هل السودان شعبا مهيأ للسلام مع إسرائيل؟
نعم، بفتكر انه الان الشعب السوداني مهيأ، والدليل على ذلك انه لما حصل لقاء نتنياهو وبرهان لم يكن هناك اعتراض شعبي. يعني عادة في السودان في مثل هذه القضايا، سواء كانت القضايا الداخلية أو القضايا الخارجية ذات الحساسية العالية، يعبر عنها الشعب بالخروج للشارع يعني معترضا.
So I would say, عفوا بس أقاطعك وأترجم، إنه my answer would be yes, and I would say, cite by way of example, that when Netanyahu and Burhan met publicly, we did not see a massive turnout of opposition or mass demonstrations. In the more distant past, when a dramatic thing that angered the population happened, people would take to the streets and demonstrate against it loudly. تفضل عزيزي.
زي ما ذكرت أيضا إنه الآن حديث عن السلام يعني يحظو بقاعدة شعبية كبيرة، والدليل على ذلك يعني آخر الأسبوع الماضي كان هناك منتدى اقتصادي، أول منتدى اقتصادي حكومي.
And
فتم
so indeed, there are also more recent examples to show that the popular support is there. And just last week, there was an announcement of an economic forum in Sudan. تفضل.
شهد هذا المنتدى أصوات تنادي بالتقارب باعتبار إنه الآن السودان في ظل وضع جديد، وضع للتعايش مع المجتمع الدولي بعد 30 عاما من العزلة الخارجية.
During the course of that forum, voices expressed themselves saying that it's time to come together, referring to Israeli Sudanese coming together, that after decades of international isolation,
هذه الأصوات يعني حتى في هذا المنتدى وأكبر منتدى يعني عقد في خلال الفترة الانتقالية، يعني حظي بالتصفيق العالي، يعني وده يعني دلالة واضحة على حتى لو كان هذا التجمع الحضور النخبوي، لكن برضو بيؤكد بأنه الغالبية يعني هي طواقة للسلام.
And we saw that the statements coming out of this economic forum were, and even in this interim transitional period, were widely applauded in a public sense. And so, yes, this was an elite group of people who came together, but they were met with widespread popular support for what they said.
بل بالعكس إنه هناك أحزاب رئيسية في القوى الحرية والتغيير، يعني مثلا المؤتمر السوداني يعني من أكبر الأحزاب السودانية أعلنت تأييدها للتطبيع.
And for that matter, even on the level of some of the largest parties in Sudan, the People's Party and so on, have expressed publicly their support as a party for normalization.
نسمع من حين لآخر أيضا تجمعات شبابية، مؤتمرات صحفية، جمعيات كلها تنادي بالسلام والتقارب.
We see it happening in terms of youth activities, new organizations that are being founded, press conferences that are calling for this new relationship.
يعني حتى الأصوات المعارضة يعني شبه يعني لا صوت لها يعني.
And even the opposition forces simply are not manifesting that same loud voice.
طبعا يعني قد يأتي
معليش اسماعيل، أعتقد إنه رئيس المعهد يحب ربما يتابع أو شيء.
I'd like to come back to the issue that was raised about threats that some of you received for having participated in events with Israelis. There's a number of ways to talk, a number of questions I want to ask you about this. One is, do existing institutions, not your own national journalist associations, but Arab journalist associations, Arab writers union, Arab public institutions across the Middle East, do you think that they have the ability to reform themselves to accommodate the world of peacemaking? That's question one. And question two is, what sort of new laws? I mean, it's one thing to get rid of old bad laws. And you, Mohammed, referred to getting rid of the law that made it a crime to do business with Israel. It's one thing to get rid of old laws. Are there new laws that you think are necessary to protect people like you and to build a culture of peace between peoples? So two questions, one about Arab institutions and second about law that might be needed.
Thank you, Robert. This is a very important question, actually. Let me speak in Arabic. And this first about sorry, Joseph. بخصوص المنظمات الصحفية العربية، دعوني أخبركم قصة. منذ أن تم الإعلان عن اتفاق الإمارات بعلاقة السلام مع إسرائيل، كانت هناك محاولات من بعض الجمعيات الصحفية العربية لطرد جمعية الصحفيين الإماراتية من اتحاد الصحفيين العرب.
So may I say that to begin with, to your question about Arab journalist associations, I'll tell you a little story. No sooner had the UAE announced its peace settlement with Israel, then there was a call by multiple Arab journalists associations outside the UAE to have the UAE Journalists Association removed from the Arab Federation of Journalists Associations.
ولحسن الحظ أن علاقاتنا الجيدة مع أغلب الجمعيات العربية لم يكتمل نصاب الاجتماع لإخراج جمعية الصحفيين الإماراتية من هذا الاتحاد.
Fortunately, thanks to our good relationships with so many of the member states, that attempt was thwarted and they did not succeed in removing us from the federation.
المحاولات ستستمر، نحن نعرف ذلك ضدنا أو حتى ضد البحرين، لكن نحن في مثل هذه الحالات ندرك أن بعض الجمعيات العربية لديها مواقف ضد السلام مع إسرائيل.
We know very well that these kinds of assaults on us are going to continue, both against us and against our counterparts in Bahrain, because we know that these associations maintain a very strong core that is opposed fundamentally to peace.
في المقابل روبرت، نحن بحاجة كجمعيات صحفية في دول تعمل على السلام أن نحصل على دعم من الاتحادات والجمعيات والمنظمات الصحفية الإعلامية الدولية، سواء كانت في واشنطن في أوروبا وفي العالم. نحن بحاجة إلى هذا الدعم إذا أردنا أن نسير في طريق السلام.
So Robert, we need part of this is that we need support from the international community of journalists, from international journalists associations, whether in the United States or Europe or elsewhere, to stand with us as well.
بخصوص السؤال الثاني، بلا شك نحن بحاجة إلى تشريع. أنا حسب ما أعلم أن هناك تشريع في مجلس الشيوخ الأمريكي يناقش موضوع تجريم أو ما شابه ذلك كل من يعمل ضد السلام أو من لديه قوانين تجرم السلام، وأنا أتمنى أن هذا الأمر ينال الدعم حقيقة في الولايات المتحدة.
And so indeed, to your second question, Robert, we are in need of new laws. I am aware of the fact that in the Senate there's been an initiative to pass a law that addresses or talks about the issue of these anti-normalization laws in Arab countries, and that is the sort of thing that we would welcome and which we hope to see happen.
بلا شك اليوم القانون مهم في دولنا. الكل يعني إذا أراد أن يتحرك في السلام يجب أن يلتزم بقوانين دولته، أن يحافظ على نفسه، على حياته، على مستقبله المهني. ولذلك وجود وتعديل التشريعات هذا أمر أساسي يجب أن لا نتجاهله.
And indeed, we're talking about people who want to live in peace and security and abide by the laws of their countries. And they don't want to break the law. But in order to do that, these laws need to be changed. These laws need to be adjusted or repealed.
And Ahdeya, thank you, Mohamed.
Thank you.
Ahdeya, I mean, you were very compelling in telling the story of the threats that you received. What's the solution? What would you like governments to do? What would you like other institutions to do to address this problem?
Thank you, Robert. I think our governments are being protective towards us, but if there are legislations, we do have actual legislations against hate speech and inciting hatred and creating chaos. But I think that if these laws are implemented more strongly, it will protect people like us who have different views than others who do not want to incite hatred, who actually want a message of peace. And I did speak about the legislation which Senators Cory Booker and Robert Portman introduced in August. And this is a legislation that is very important. We cannot move forward by having people who are scared. People need to feel that the laws of the countries support them, protect them, but also that they are in line with international agreements, international approach. I placed a complaint with International Federation of Journalists, and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain are members of that. I have received very good support from the Gender Council, in which I'm a member of the steering committee. But I feel that no, there should be more international entities that protect journalists. Our laws are fine, but international entities need to have a louder voice, not just the Federation of Journalists. No, I think there are peace councils, peace institutes, and think tanks should be pushing for passing laws that protect people from being a target.
So I received lots of questions from viewers, and many of them are variations of this, which is, you are all very courageous people. What is your advice? What would you like? What sort of help you need, and not just you, but your societies need, in order to really build a people-to-people foundation for peace? What has to happen? I mean, it's not enough just to have a very important Zoom conference with other journalists. What has to happen on an ongoing basis? And people are asking me not just about journalists, but all walks of life. What sort of investments, what sort of efforts need to happen to really build in your societies a convincing, strong foundation for peacemaking? Joseph, maybe you want to synopsize that in Arabic for some of our guests, but I want to ask Sukina to start with this.
Did you say Sukina, Rob? Is that what you said? Okay, sure. أنا بس علشان أوضح السؤال إنه تكثرت الإيميلات، منها تساؤلات كثيرة، ومنها الكثير يعني المعدل يتكلم عن سؤال واحد بطريقة أو بأخرى، ألا وهو ما الذي يمكن للمجتمع الدولي أن يقدم كي يعزز ما تنادون به من مشاريع أو مبادرات لتقوية ما تسعون إليه من تحقيق سلام بين شعوب. والسؤال موجه أولاً إلى سكينة.
سكينة، لا نسمع.
سكينة أنت على ميوت الآن.
أستاذ محمد الحمادي تحدث عن القانون الذي تحدث عنه الكونغرس الأمريكي على ما أعتقد، الذي يخص دعاة السلام. مثل هذه القوانين تحمينا من عملية، أنا لا أتحدث بأننا ممكن أن أضطهد من الحكومة السعودية، يعني حتى الآن كما تحدث بأننا لم نتعرض لأي شيء، ولكن ماذا لو حدث ذلك في المستقبل؟ يجب أن تكون هنالك جهات معينة، قوانين معينة تحمينا، يتم المساءلة عن أحوالنا من الذي حدث لنا يعني.
So for example, what Mohamed Al-Hammadi referred to of the law that is has been introduced in the United States, I myself as a Saudi national, as I will repeat and say that I have not been summoned or punished by my government in any way. The question is, of course, going forward, what is to happen in the future, and what recourse might there be for people who take these bold steps and do face retribution? What recourse will they have?
منذ أيام مثلا تعرضت إلى تغريدات في موقع التواصل الاجتماعي تويتر من أحد المتابعين السعوديين، هو يتحدث بوجهه، وضع صورته وأيضا بحساب معروف يعني، وقام بتهديدي وسألني سؤال: أين أنت؟ فقط لأنني أنادي بالسلام. لو
So,
قمت
for example, I myself found myself looking at some activity on social media by somebody from Saudi Arabia. قلتي إنه تم تغميض وجهه يعني مش
لا
واضح.
هو وجهه واضح وضح صورته الشخصية.
Okay, and so he showed his own picture and so on. He said, "Where are you on this?" And I said, "I support peace."
لو قمت برفع شكوى ضد هذا الرجل في أي دائرة في السعودية، هل سوف تتم محاسبته؟ بمعنى هو يقوم بتهديدي، هل سيتم محاسبته؟ هل هنالك قانون أو تشريع يحميني وقت ذاك من أنني من دعاة السلام، وكل من يتعرض لي بالإيذاء أو التهديد عبر مواقع التواصل تهديدي أو تهديد أسرتي، هل ستتم محاسبته؟
So, for example, when that person, as he did, goes on to threaten me or to threaten my family, is there a way that I can submit a complaint somewhere and for there to be some consequences when someone threatens me or my family in that way?
نعم فقط.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else want to make a suggestion on Ahdeya? You want to add something on this question?
Yes, Robert. Since this is what I believe, that since people are now very supportive of the peace agreement, especially the journalists, I believe that we should not let it cool down. And I dream of having a society or a committee called the Bahrain Israeli Journalist Friendship Society. If we do it now, this will be a great start. If you bring journalists together who speak the same language, I think they will be able to connect with each other. And I think that would be a great start. I'm not concerned with signing agreements and training and these programs. No, this will come with time. But now we need to build on the potential that we have. We have journalists from Israel, we have journalists from Bahrain, from the United Arab Emirates, who are all willing to do something. I get calls from my friends and colleagues, and after the invitation we received from the Israeli president to come to Israel, I got telephone calls from our friends who said that idea for the BJA is intending to go to Israel. We want to get involved in this program. So I think COVID has stopped us, but eventually, soon, very soon, we have to exchange visits. This is the only way. If we wait for another 6 months or 1 year, it will cool down. And I think since the heat is on and people are eager, let's do it as soon as possible.
Yes, please. هذا السؤال جدا مهم وكل من طرحه يعكس اهتمامه حقيقة بالموضوع وأنا أشكرهم في البداية.
This is, of course, a very important question, and the person who asks it, in doing so, has reflected his concern for this cause, and I thank him for it.
نحن نحتاج شيئين روبرت، شيء إعلامي وشيء سياسي.
We need two things, Robert. We need something in the media, in the realm of media, and something in the realm of politics.
إعلاميا أنا لا أريد أن نبدو نحن في هذا الاجتماع وكأننا نستجدي الدعم، نحن بحاجة إلى التضامن.
I don't want to make it appear, and now I'm speaking on the level of media, as if we are asking for support. No, we are asking for solidarity.
وهذا الأمر هو الذي يمكن أن يساعدنا حتى نتحرك وكل من يريد أن يلتحق بنا.
Solidarity is what enables us to move and to inspire others to join with us.
الشيء الآخر السياسي، يجب أن نعرف أننا حتى نستطيع أن نتكلم بقوة على السلام يجب على إسرائيل في الداخل كذلك أن تتحرك بطريقة تساعد دعاة السلام بأنهم يتكلموا ويرفعوا صوتهم.
And on the political side, while we move forward in calling for peace, we need to see the Israeli side make decisions and take actions that validate this approach that we are adopting.
إذا تسمح لي روبرت، هل تعرف ما هي الصورة أو التعليق في الشارع العربي بعد الاتفاق الإسرائيلي الإماراتي؟
And may I ask, Robert, do you know what the picture was, the phenomenon was after the announcement of the UAE Israel agreement?
الكثير من الناس في الشارع العربي يقولون أن إسرائيل لن تلتزم بعهودها، وأن ما حدث هو فخ أمريكي إسرائيلي لدعم إسرائيل وتجاوز الحقوق الفلسطينية.
A lot of people said that this is a trap, an American-Israeli trap. Israel will not abide by its commitments, and they will ignore the rights of the Palestinians.
أخيراً أنا أعتقد نحن بحاجة إلى كيان إعلامي يدعم الإعلاميين والصحفيين والمفكرين والكتاب الذين يؤمنون بالسلام حتى يكون هناك دعم والتعاون وعمل مشترك.
And finally, I believe that there needs to be a new media entity, a new media organization that proactively supports those in our field, in the Arab world, who stand for and call for peace.
Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. I'm afraid that we hit our witching hour, as we say. I want to thank all of you. أرجو أن أشكر كلكم هذه المناقشة مهمة مفيدة جيدة. I want to thank all of you for this important and very useful conversation. I want to congratulate all of you. I want to thank you, and I want to wish you all strength as we move ahead to the next step and many more steps on the path of building a firm and lasting peace. Thank you.
شكرا. 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 شكرا جوزيف. شكرا على الترجمة.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Joseph.
Joseph, thank you very much.
Thank you.